Okay, I'll call this open meeting back to order. Thank you all for being here. And we will start with 5, the consent agenda. Do I have someone move approval of the consent agenda? Moved by Director Rich Jones, seconded by Director Crompton. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. I'll ask it offline. It's not that. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Being none, we'll go into 7.1.1, the electoral area director's recommendations, and we're at the 2022-2026 budget discussion. Director Mack.
I was just going to move these 2 cost centers.
Okay. Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Demare. Are there questions or comments on this topic? Do you want to do that?
Yes, if Director Stoner wanted to raise that budget-related question, we can deal with that now.
So are we on the regional budget, board budgets right now? Sorry, I just want to make sure I have the right thing. So basically, it's described in the board budget documents. That's why I was hoping that we were at that point. But it's salaries and benefits together. So the associated staff benefits to reduce everything to the 100K with the salaries.
Okay.
But yeah, we can discuss it when we get to that item as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've got a mover and seconder for 7.1.1. Any further comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. 7.1.2 regarding the zoning amendment bylaw, electoral area B agricultural zoning updates. Director Rich Jones.
I'd be very pleased to move these.
Okay, we have a question I have a move by Director Rich Jones, seconded by Director Mack. Question from Director Elliott, go ahead.
I'm trying to learn here a little bit, but I wasn't sure why there was disagreement between the agricultural committee and staff on the need for farm status. That seemed important, but the committee didn't think so, and that was their only point of disagreement. So I'm curious. I'm supportive of staff's direction, but I don't. Yeah. Does
Anybody want to field that question?
Vivian does.
Oh, go ahead, Director Rich Jones.
Thank you. I heard at some length from various farmers on the AAC, and I mean, Claire Dewar could certainly answer this better than me, but it is a complex process to apply for farm status. We heard quite a bit about it. And it's also quite meaningless in the grand scheme of agriculture in Area B. Oh, and there's Ms. Dewar. So that's better than me answering that question. I'll go back on mute. I heard.
Okay, the question, are you on to answer the question, Director, or Ms. Dewar?
Thank you. Through the chair, Claire Dewar, Senior Planner at the SLRD, just joining in to speak to 7.1, I believe, on the Area B zoning bylaw piece. And I will say I was a part of this meeting as a staff liaison for the Agriculture Advisory Committee, and I'm not actually responsible for this bylaw, but I'm happy to speak to some of the discussions that took place at the meeting. And so from some of the discussions at the Area B AAC committee were around farm status, and that at a certain threshold, it can be really difficult to obtain farm status, as it is based on the assessed value of the property. And as property assessments go up, the thresholds for how much you need to be I guess selling can be challenging. At least this was communicated for our Area B farmers, and that it wasn't felt that it was always a beneficial tool in terms of how much farming is actually having, or how much farming is taking place on the property. And then from staff's perspective, we have limited tools to prove out whether farmland is actually being used for farming, and farm class is one of our key tools. It may not be a perfect one, but it's sort of the tool that we're left with. So, that's maybe where there was the difference of opinions between staff and the committee. I will say, it may have different application in different areas of the regional district as well. And, what's implemented in area B may be different than, say, like what's implemented in area C or D, just in terms of that farm classification piece. I'll leave it at there though, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Director Crompton?
What's the alternative to your approach? Through the chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Stewart.
So if I understand the question correctly, and I will say that I missed a little bit of the discussion just coming into the meeting, but are we asking what the alternative to, I guess we can either require farm status or not. There isn't really an alternative. And from staff's perspective, it is a beneficial metric to require. And we're hearing from our farmers that it's not always, farmers aren't always actually seeking farm class because it's a barrier. So that's sort of what we're left with. And perhaps Director Birch-Jones has more to add, as she was also at that committee discussion.
I certainly heard loud and clear from one of the participants who's a farmer that looking at her assessed value and then trying to calculate a percentage of earnings and demonstrate that level of earnings as part of showing that she was really a bureaucratic exercise that didn't have a lot of meaning or import, and it didn't mean that she wasn't farming. What we have in Area B is a heck of a lot of farmland, not enough farmers, and those that are often struggling. And so it was just a barrier we felt could be removed. And it was a fairly strong sentiment on the part of the Area B AAC. So I would like to see this passed as decided.
Any other questions? We have the motion on the floor. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Claire.
Thank you for being here. We're going on to 7.1.3 regarding the Britannia Beach pump track.
Sorry,
Is that something that?
I wasn't intending to.
Oh, okay.
If the, I'm not sure person how.
Well, this is a director's report.
Yeah. How would you like us to handle this? Just
I'll make a motion
Proceed.
to defer it
motion
until
to
after the EAD meeting.
I refer it back to,
EAD.
so, okay.
Yeah.
So the motion is to refer this report to the EAD for April. Mover, seconded by Director Crompton. Any comments, or I guess you don't comment on a deferral, so I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 7.2.1 regarding the PVIS budgets. Director Mack, go ahead.
Yeah, I would move these as presented.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Zand. Any comments or questions? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we're on 7.2.2, Pemberton Area C BioBlitz funding. Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Mack. Comment? Anyone opposed? Oh, did you have a comment, Director Birch Jones? Are you?
Thank you. Yep, of course, I completely support this. I just wondered when it says electoral area C, where are those funds coming from? It's
Okay. Director Mack, do you have funds for this?
Yes, I do.
All right.
So they can come from Area C select funds. I was thinking it was coming from our Peeves committee, but for sure, the funds can come from Area C select funds.
Okay. Are you comfortable with that, Director LaFrance? I see you pop up. Okay, great. Thank you. I've called the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're on 8.1 parcel tax bylaws. And I imagine we have to do these in 2 blocks. So all the first, second, and third readings as 1 block, and this is a unweighted all vote. Okay, everyone know what we're doing here? Moved by Director Demers, seconded by Director Weeb. Any comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And then the second block is the adoption of all of these, moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Demers. Comments? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 8.2, the financial plan bylaw, and this is 2 blocks again for the first, second, and third reading. Moved by Director Demers,
I think
seconded by
Counselor Stoner wants to ask her question now.
Okay. Let's just get the motion moved and seconded by Director Crompton. Comments or questions? Director Stoner, go ahead. We can't hear you, Jenna.
Is that any better?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay. I was going to say, Director LaFrance's previous comments were helpful in terms of the salary changes. I just noted in the notes as well that there was still reference to specific positions, despite previous board discussion around not endorsing specific roles and providing some leeway there as the new CAO came up to date. So I was just curious if those are allocated for specific positions or if that's still an open kind of envelope for hiring. Currently, we haven't had the discussions yet in terms of building a concrete plan. So we're still working off of the documents that the previous CAO has created. So yes, those positions are still on the plan, but they're still subject to change as well. Okay, that's helpful. And then I had one other clarifying question, and maybe I should ask this previously, but I'm wondering if you can just provide a description of what the transfer expenses are. They seem to vary widely depending on the budget. So for example, for regional solid waste, there's no transfer expense, but for others, it's like $260,000. So I'm just curious if you can explain what falls under that category. Yeah, the transfer expenses are 2 different types of transfers. So there's transfers expense to reserve. So anytime you're transferring funds to a reserve, it shows up as a transfer expense. And also if you're transferring funds to another service, which only really happens in general government. So if there's reserves that are held just in general government, say gas tax fund, and we want to use them for Britannia Beach Sewer, I have to move those funds from general government as a transfer to other service. So that shows up as a transfer expense as well.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I want to thank Director LaFrance again this year. The process that we went through again this year to do the budgets was easy and simple, and I know I personally worked with Suzanne and Angela on some of the budgets there, and it worked out very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now considering adoption of this bylaw. Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Crompton. Any other comments? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, and thank you very much, Director LaFrance, for all your good work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now on 8.3. Is there a presentation?
Any presentation?
Did the board want a presentation?
I think it was a fairly straightforward report. Have any questions that they'd like asked at this point? No? Okay, we're considering first reading and referral. Couple referrals. Did you want us to move these separately?
They can be moved together. Thank you.
All of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Moved by Director Mack, or did you have a question or comment?
Yes, no, moved.
Okay, moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Elliott. Any further comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And, okay, we're now on 8.4, Birkenhead Lake Estate Zoning Amendment Bylaw, second reading and waiver of notice. Moved by Director Mack.
Yes,
Okay, seconded by Director Demare. Any other comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Moving through this quickly. This is the 8.5 House Sound East and Electoral Area D housekeeping amendments regarding DPAs, third reading and MODI approval. Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Crompton. Comments or questions? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 8.6, 9669 Pemberton Portage Road Area C zoning amendment bylaw adoption, moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Zant. Any comments or questions? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And, holy smokes, we're gonna move through so fast. 8.7, the Affordable Housing Amendment, second reading, and sorry, this is a rescind of the original one, a new second reading, public hearing waived and notice waived. Are there any questions? Director Crompton, go ahead.
Can I just ask, what are the nub of the changes? The very high level nub,
Yes, through the chair. So this report stems from the housing needs and demand study that we did, and it requested that a number of amendments be done where possible to the various OCPs and zoning bylaws. So this one came through, we went to a public hearing. At the public hearing, people said, well, we like the idea of adding another opportunity for a secondary suite. However, we'd like to see those also available for bona fide retirees and family members. So we've included that in this bylaw. That's sort of the main change. So essentially, already you can build a secondary suite or carriage house at Wedgwoods. This would allow people to build both, provided that they covenant both of the units for affordable housing in perpetuity.
So they can't be nightly rentals.
Correct. There are no nightly rentals allowed in Wedgwoods. Some people at the public hearing would like us to allow 2 units and allow nightly rentals, and we've advised that that is not the point of this zoning amendment bylaw.
Follow up?
The change for family and retiree, they would then qualify as employees?
Okay, so there would need to be a covenant, a section 219 on the property to specify that both units must be rented to a person who is currently employed within the geographic area of the SLRD, a former employee of the region, a retiree living full-time in the unit, or a family member of the property owner living full-time in the unit. Retirees must have worked in the SLRD for a minimum of 5 of the last 10 years of their working lives.
And how, if at all, aside from a stat deck, are we going to ensure that this happens?
A stat deck is really our main way of dealing with it. Although we often hear about these things from nosy neighbors who like to complain about violations of things going on. So it would become stat deck plus bylaw enforcement.
So the City of Vancouver empty homes tax is administrated by like this assumption that you're doing wrong, right? Like it assumes and taxes for an empty, unless you, I wish I could clarify, but the assumption is that you need to prove to us every time that you are doing it correctly. Is there any consideration of making the onus on the owner to follow up on this rather than us to chase stat techs? So you must give us an annual report or whenever we want it so that we can confirm your use as you've agreed to use it.
We can set that up in the 219 covenant, just with the wording.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how much take up there will be on this particular bylaw amendment, but at least it provides an opportunity for people, if they do wish to have another unit, they can do so. And it's just another regulation that enables people to create more affordable housing.
Mm-hmm. And take what are large homes and maybe subdivide the homes a bit, like have those homes be more allocated.
Yeah, they won't be allowed to be a strata subdivision, just to be clear on that. But
Wrong word, not subdivide, but
yeah,
use the space for more.
that's clear. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have Director Elliott, then Director Mack, then Director Stoner.
My question was answered, thank you.
Okay, Director Mack, do you have a question or comment?
No, I was just going to move this as presented.
Okay, and I will go to Director Stoner. Question?
My question was also answered. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have it moved by Director Mack and I have it seconded by Director Crompton. Go ahead.
Sorry, could we just do the first batch? The rescinding on its own?
Yes.
Thanks.
So this is to move rescinding the second reading. Is moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Crompton. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And now the new second reading and public hearing waived and notice waived is moved by Director Mack and seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any comments? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for being here to answer those questions.
Sorry,
And we-
just for clarity, Director Stoner, you weren't opposed, were you? You were, thank you.
Okay, and it is 12:30 and I am imposing a recess for lunch. Please come back shortly before 1 o'clock for our delegations and enjoy your lunch. Thank you all.
If our virtual attendees want to turn off their cameras, we'll leave the live streaming going through the break. Thanks.
Were you gonna say something?
No.
Muted.
I'm still muted. I double checked.
Thank you.
Don't want that screaming again. Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order. Thank you all for coming back so promptly. And we're going back in the agenda to number 4.1. We have a delegation from Nicole Jean here from Pemberton. Come on up to the table if you like.
So you're right here?
Yeah,
Thanks. Do you want me to sit down or stand?
if you like, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here. You have 5 minutes to tell us your presentation, and we like to have questions if possible. So, or at least.
Yeah, I'm not really not gonna be too long.
Okay.
So I've been asked what organization I represent. I don't represent any organization. I've lived in Area C for almost 30 years. And just in the last year, I've become quite concerned because I personally have found 3 dead birds of prey, 2 hawks, red-tailed hawks, and 1 barred owl. I have knee surgery, like I was in an accident in February last year, broke my leg, had knee surgery. So I haven't even been out and about very much and have found these 3 birds. I phoned, there's a wild bird mortality hotline. It's kind of a mouthful, but I phoned them after the 2nd bird we found because I was getting a little worried. And they explained that it was probably because of rodenticide poisoning. And I had never heard of that before. In fact, the first hawk that I found, my partner and I were kind of like, wow, what would have killed this? We were trying to think of, maybe an eagle came and attacked it. We're trying to think of how this could have died. And then she's like, oh no, it was probably rodenticide poisoning in all of the cases. The most recent one was in February that we found the barred owl. And it was still alive, but unfortunately it died as well. So yeah, there's a picture of him up there. Anyways, so it's just become a concern of mine. And as I learned about this, I became more and more aware of the problem. And the BC government is aware of the problem. They, in July last year, implemented a temporary 2-year ban on what's called 2nd generation rodenticides. And these are a chemical, like the kind of newer chemicals that they've been using in rodenticides that they have found are having a huge impact on wildlife, not just birds of prey, but also coyotes, cougars, and other mammals as well. And they can be harmful to children and pets as well. So I'm happy that the government has instituted this ban. However, I don't think it's enough. And I think it's only a temporary ban. It only deals with 2nd generation rodenticides, not all of them. So I guess I'm just here to ask council to consider doing more. There are 20 municipalities and regional districts around the province that are doing more. I know it's a provincial jurisdiction, but I think that we need to kind of nudge, hopefully, the province along to kind of make it a permanent ban and also extend the ban to all anticoagulants. I mean, I'm not here to save the rats. Okay, I don't like rats at all, they're a problem, but there are a lot better ways to deal with them than using the poison. The poison is easy, it's the easy way out, but there are all kinds of kill traps that work, just your standard old mouse trap that was invented over 100 years ago works, but there are also more modern kill traps that can be used as well. There's one that's just come out from Australia. It has CO2 cartridge and a little sniffer bay that the rats go up and sniff in, and a bolt goes through their head. It's a very humane way to kill many rats. some people might argue that a trap is a slow process, we don't have enough time to check traps, but there's electric traps, there's all kinds of other ways that we can deal with rodent problems. Also, there's a corn cellulose pellet, which looks like rat poison, but it's not, it's kind of expands. It's not a particular humane thing, but it expands in their stomach. So there are other methods of controlling rodents without using rodenticides. So yeah, I'm just kind of here to ask the council consider banning the use of rodenticides on SLRD property. So whether that's, playgrounds or, parks or community halls, I don't know, what have you, just kind of to show that people are concerned. I'm also hoping that the SLRD could come up with a rodent kind of plan, so the businesses and people who are, having difficulty have some type of document that they can follow, rather than just going to Amazon, which you can still do. I Googled it, and buying one of these rodenticides. Despite the ban, it's very easy to do. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of the problem. Last July, I went, after we found the second hog, I went around to some of my neighbors and just started talking to them about it, thinking that it must be someone in my neighborhood. I live in Pemberton North. And most of them are completely unaware about the ban. About the effects of the rodenticide, and just were quite interested to find out. And so that was the kind of flyer that I made up. And also, my daughter also put up a Facebook page, and you might have seen it, just saying, oh my gosh, we found like the third bird here. And I had a surprising number of people reply going, gee, we found a dead owl on the bathtub trail. We found, a dead owl in our barn, and the Damascus had one fall out of the sky on their yard, so it's quite a problem in our area. So that's why I'm here. So I was thinking, just if council, the third thing would be to try and educate people about the harm of rodenticides, maybe like a mail out in our property tax assessment. Maybe that's a bit too late now, but something, or just putting something on the website. Yeah, so I hope I didn't take up too much of your time.
Thank you very much. I'll open it to questions. Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering if you reached out to the Pemberton Wildlife Association.
I have, yeah. In fact, they put the flyer that I gave to the residents in Pemberton North on their website and their Facebook page as well. Yeah, they're quite concerned about this as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Director Birch-Jones, go ahead. And then Director's name.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation and your work and your concern. And yes, the birds of prey have a lot of things working against them, and they do not need this. In August of 2021, this board sent a letter to Minister George Heyman, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, about the issues that you're referring to, and making some requests, recommendations to support the ban and strengthen some of the follow-up and not lift it. I would like it if we would send a follow-up letter to Minister Hyman, to that letter that we wrote August 12th, because it kind of nails some of the issues that you're talking about. I'll make that motion if it's appropriate, but also I wondered if you have worked with BC Nature, or even better, closer to home, the Pemberton Wildlife Association, because they do a lot of good work. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Zant, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to say thank you for the presentation. Director Birch-Jones answered my question. I was wondering if the board had sent a letter already. So thank you to the board for that. And thank you for the work that you're doing. And I look forward to hearing you at the Village of Pemberton Council table. I hear that you're on the agenda for the next meeting. So and then we have a couple, I'm pretty sure we'll have a couple of council members. I'll be definitely interested in hearing what you have to say. So thank you.
Certainly. Go ahead.
One of the things that we discovered in Squamish is we didn't know if we were using rodenticides in our pest management. And so that's one of the things to actually find out is how much our staff are using it or not actually on district property. And I think the piece around education is an interesting one, and given Area C and this presentation is going to Pemberton, there's probably an opportunity there for joint education along with some community partners. So, one, I would like to refer this information back to our staff to bring back some information on whether we even use this product in our work.
That would be a very good question. I did go to, as I said, 30 homes in my area and gave them the flyer. I talked personally to each homeowner. The majority of people said, oh no, I never use that stuff, but other people were using poison and they had no idea. And to be honest, I had no idea which brands were, second generation and which weren't. They bought them years ago, or if they bought them recently, what would determine that. So, and then there were also about 5 households that were using pest control companies, and they don't apply, that they're allowed to use whatever they want. This doesn't apply to them. And so my fear is that that's how these anticoagulants are affecting the birds around me, but that's just a theory. I don't know exactly. So I would like to see the ban extended to pest control companies unless there's some type of health, problem or dire emergency as well.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Director Mack, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks for this information. And can we somehow have this put on our webpage, this information, so that it's out there and it could be on the regional webpage, and I'm sure the village would do that too. But this is important to do.
Yeah. I think we could consider a motion to combine Director Birch Jones and Director Elliott. So to write a follow-up letter to the minister requesting that the ban stay in place until the scientific evidence is available. I'm sure from their response to us was that the minister's order was in place for 18 months, and they've begun a scientific review, which includes a review of available scientific literature, as well as connections with leading experts on rodenticide use. And then they'll make recommendations for provincial course of action. So that's their commitment from last August. We could follow up with, how are you doing with that? And then to Director Elliott's point, refer this to staff and request a report back as to how we could implement, or how we can understand what we're currently doing, and then make further recommendations at that point. And then to your point, or I think it was Director Mack said to put it on our website. So it's a fairly, I think, lots of steps, but comfortable with that as far as?
Yes, and I think on the communication side, we just have to look at what would be appropriate, but absolutely, we can bring that all back and move forward.
Okay. Director Elliott?
So put a motion on the floor that we send a follow-up letter to Minister Heyman and encourage them to include pest management companies in the ban immediately.
Okay.
And also to get an update on their progress, and that we refer the information presented by the delegation to staff to bring back to the board information on our use of rodenticides in the regional district, and opportunities to collaborate with the community and the VOP on education.
Okay.
And whether we should consider a ban ourselves.
Okay. There are motions on the floor, seconded by Director Weave. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here today.
Thank you very much for your support. Yeah, it's great. Thank you. I'd just like to say that the BCS, BCA, and the province do have some material online, educational material online as well. If you're looking for it, that's where I got a lot of my information. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you
you
very
so
much.
Okay, we're now moving to our second delegation, which is Blackwell and Associates. Okay. Okay, we have our second delegation, Ms. Zemanek. Hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So we have you and we have Mr. Fusca from our emergency management team and Director Morgan from our emergency management department, who is starting this delegation.
Chair, I can introduce that.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have 20 minutes for this presentation. We would like to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and Board. My name is Mike Fusca. I'm an emergency management technician with the SLRD's Protective Services Department. Today, I'm here to introduce Deborah Zemanek of BA Blackwell and Associates to speak to our community wildfire resiliency plans for electoral areas C and D. Deborah has been working closely with us over the past year to develop these plans, as well as hosting our community Firesmart committees in electoral areas C and D. And then this is all related to agenda item 9.11 to receive those CWRPs later today. So yeah, it's if there are no questions at this point, I'll hand it over to Deborah.
Great, thanks, Mike. I believe you have the presentation, my presentation to share. Perfect, thank you. Yes, thank you for listening to this presentation today. As Mike said, I'm a forester working for BA Blackwell and Associates, and we worked with Mike and Sarah to develop community wildfire resiliency plans for electoral areas C and D. So I'll just start off with explaining the photos on this screen. I know in the SLRD, you're very familiar with emergencies and with evacuation events. Wildfires are a common occurrence, and these photos here are just two of the recent fires. So on the left, it's the Husham Creek fire, which occurred in 2018 on the western side of Anderson Lake in electoral area C. And then on the right-hand side is the Cloudburst fire in Squamish Valley last summer. So next slide, please. So this is going to be a 10 to 15 minute presentation. I'll try and leave as much time as I can for questions. Basically, I'll just introduce what a community wildfire resiliency plan is, how it is developed, what the plans lead to, and then I'll briefly talk about the study areas for each electoral area, look at what the local fire threat is on a spatial scale, and then go over some select recommendations. Next slide. So basically, community wildfire resiliency plans are strategic planning documents. They are high level. These are provincially funded. And as part of the plan, consultants like BA Blackwell will assess and update local wildfire threat. We go in the field and we collect data on what the current forest structure is and develop recommendations for basically how the local government, in this case, the SLRD, can increase their resiliency to wildfire. So these plans support funding applications for Firesmart and fuel treatments. Next slide. This infographic just shows what kind of goes into the plans. Like Mike mentioned, as part of this plan, we formed a community Firesmart resiliency committee. So that included representation from the Ministry of Forests, BC Wildfire Service, BC Parks, and emergency management staff from member municipalities and Lillooet Nation and Squamish Nation. We held 6 meetings, each with a different Firesmart focus. And those meetings really helped me understand, and Mike and Sarah understand what is currently happening in the region in terms of Firesmart resiliency preparedness, and also what the weak points could be, which then informed the plan. Next slide. So this slide just shows how the community wildfire resiliency plans can form the basis for the next several years of Firesmart work in a region. They inform where fuel management prescriptions and fuel treatments should be prioritized, and also what Firesmart activities may be especially helpful. And they're valid for 5 years. So this plan was actually an update to the 2016 plan for electoral area C and D, and another plan update will have to be completed at in about 5 years, so 2026. Next slide. So now we're jumping into the plans themselves. So this map shows the study area for electoral area C. So it's the black outline is what's called the wildland urban interface. It's a 1 kilometer bubble around areas that have a structure density of 6 or greater per square kilometer. So you'll see it basically encompasses all the communities and populated areas within the region. Next slide. This map shows the spatial distribution of wildfire threat within electoral area C. So like I mentioned, it was updated to reflect on the ground forest structure and fuel types. Slope, aspect, and climatic zone also play into the threat rating here. Next slide. So this map, it's analogous to the first map I showed. It's the wildland urban interface for electoral area D around Squamish. Next slide. And likewise, this is the updated local fire threat map for electoral area D. As you can see, it's generally a lower wildfire threat than electoral area C, mainly because it's a different climatic zone. Next slide. So now we're going to go into the recommendations that Blackwell developed for the SLRD. So each plan had 30 to 40 recommendations. Most of them are targeted at the SLRD, not all of them. And so we basically lay out who would be responsible for implementing each recommendation, and we estimate what the resources required to implement that recommendation would be. So it's basically an action plan. Next slide. So these aren't all the recommendations, but they're featured recommendations that apply in many cases to both areas. So in terms of Firesmart education for visitors, that was identified in the committee meetings as a real concern for both electoral areas. So one recommendation is to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to display more messaging on Highway 99 signs. Another suggestion was to purchase Firesmart radio ads on stations outside of the region in the Lower Mainland and throughout the Sea to Sky, because we have so many visitors from outside of the Sea to Sky. And then another recommendation was to increase patrolling of known campfire and camping spots using volunteers, potentially junior volunteers or community fire marshals. Next slide. So another important aspect of Firesmart education is Firesmart education for residents, not only visitors. So in that regard, we talked about how open burning is a concern. It has been the cause of several fires, notably in the Squamish Valley in the springtime. So it's worthwhile to target that in an education campaign specifically. Another recommendation is to continue to offer Firesmart seminars or workshops, either virtually or in person, for targeted areas pre-fire season, just to educate people on what they can do to make their homes more fire smart and what the concerns are. Next slide, please. So now we're moving into legislation, planning, and development recommendations. So I should have noted there's 7 Firesmart focus areas that this plan talks about. The first one is education. The second one is legislation and development. The third one is cross-training and Firesmart or fire department resources. So training, water, equipment, and service provision. And then The last two are emergency planning and vegetation management. So we're talking about fuel treatment there. So in terms of legislation recommendations, one recommendation is to continue or to consider meeting with the Village of Pemberton and Lillooet Nation to develop a joint fire ban enforcement policy around Pemberton. This was brought up in a couple of our committee meetings, and it was identified as a weak point. So that would be a high priority recommendation. Another suggestion is to adopt a policy to notify private landholders of wildfire threat on their property. Next slide. So in terms of recommendations for continued interagency cooperation, obviously very relevant for a regional district such as yourselves, we found that the Community Firesmart Resiliency Committee was extremely helpful, and I'm recommending that those meetings continue. I believe Mike has put that forward into funding applications. Another recommendation is to encourage the Ministry of Forests to lead an annual fuel management planning table, including better tracking of fuel treatment on public land, because this was also observed as a weakness during the plan development. There's some inefficiencies from basically not having concise tracking of prescriptions and treatments. Next slide. In terms of training for fire departments, we through talking to the fire chiefs and that sort of information sharing process, we learned that wildfire specific training could be stronger for both the Birken Volunteer Fire Department and the Garibaldi Volunteer Fire Department. So we're recommending that training occurs annually. And also to consider training SLRD emergency management personnel in some of these courses. They are funded through, or they can be funded through the same funding program that this plan update was funded through. Next slide. Also, in terms of response to wildfire, the fire chiefs identified a lack of water in certain areas that could be augmented by installing water cisterns. One area was Sutherland Road around Pemberton, and then around Britannia Beach on the by the art gallery. That was another area. And then in addition to supporting additional water, also supporting the fire departments in obtaining additional wildfire specific equipment. So all the departments that overlap these areas did identify the need for certain additional pieces of equipment. Next slide. In terms of fire department service provision, one recommendation is to look into formalizing a fire service agreement in Darcy and Devine. Both Birken Volunteer Fire Department and the Nequaqua Volunteer Fire Department respond in that area, but it is unofficial. And another recommendation is to clarify the status of the Pemberton Meadows Fire Association. Next slide. In terms of emergency planning and evacuation. So I noted that emergency planning is quite strong in the SLRD. The community emergency plans were very helpful and very comprehensive. Something that could be implemented is to work through a tabletop wildfire scenario. So basically a mock wildfire exercise. And we suggested a wildfire at Birkenhead Lake or Whistler as an example. As well, keeping those community emergency plans updated, including the action plan. We observed some things that had been completed that were out of date in the plan. All right, next slide. So other emergency planning recommendations. We noticed that the SLRD could really benefit from a rooftop sprinkler program, especially because many of the communities we visited were actually on their own water system. So again, this would be more initiated by residents and less so by the SLRD. But there's still a role to play in promoting such a program. And then also in terms of emergency water delivery is actually having a analysis or a plan of how mass amounts of water could be delivered in the event of a wildfire basically connecting natural water sources with interface neighborhoods. And these pictures here are from Logan Lake, who had a very successful sprinkler, rooftop sprinkler setup this summer in their wildfire defense. Next slide. So recommendations for fuel management. There are, well, we're recommending that the SLRD applies for funding to implement areas on regional district land that are already prescribed. And there's really only one area that's just north of Copper Drive, I believe, in Britannia Beach. Because of the changes to the funding program, the Ministry of Forests really is responsible for prescribing and treating much of the area that's in the wildland urban interface of electoral area C and D, but the SLRD can encourage the ministry to prescribe certain areas. So they're prioritized here. Next slide. So this map just shows one of the areas that we identified during field work for this plan that is high priority due to the hazardous condition and also due to its strategic location. So that's on a Portage Road north of Pemberton. Next slide. And this map shows the Britannia Beach prescription area that is basically ready to be implemented. Next slide. This is the last recommendation slide. So there's lots of Firesmart recommendations. These are only two of the ones that I selected here, and I believe that the SLRD has already been doing many or implementing many Firesmart programs. So a lot of these are just to continue doing so. One thing that was identified was to build capacity to deliver Firesmart programming by hiring a full or part-time Firesmart coordinator. This is something that I've seen in other local governments, for example, the Fraser Valley Regional District, and it seems an effective way to deliver this, this type of material to residents. And the last recommendation selected here is to continue making home ignition zone assessments available for SLRD residents. Next slide. That's it from me. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Excellent. Thank you for the excellent presentation. Are there questions? Director Mack?
Yes, thank you very much. Great presentation, and yeah, I fully support everything that you're proposing doing. I've worked with Bruce many years ago in the Divine area, doing prescriptions in the Hailmore and behind the Divine subdivision, and up in Felix Creek area. This is really, really important to be doing, and obviously it's getting more and more important. I talk to Sarah about this stuff all the time as far as equipment goes, and we've actually just put a request in for funding through Area C amenity funds to buy 4 600-gallon portable trailer units with pump and hose and all that. So hopefully that funding will get that approved as soon as possible. And those units will go one to Birken, one to Little Lake Estates, one to the Upper Meadows Fire Department, and one to Ponderosa area. Ponderosa area, Mike Morley is a super keen individual on fire smarting and has done just an amazing job on their properties and adjoining and continues to do so. So we need more of that for sure. And I'm sure that as time goes on, I just hope that the provincial government, now that they have funded their wildfire people on a year-round basis, will actually put those people to work in the off fire season, doing some of this local fire smarting, and hopefully that's their plan. But anyways, thank you very much for everything you do, and say hello to Bruce for me.
I will, thank you.
Thank you. Director Stoner, question?
Yeah, thank you to the chair. Thank you for the interesting presentation and the report. I'm curious about one of the recommendations for under the legislation planning and development around the joint fire ban enforcement policy. And I'm curious if you can speak more a little bit to the idea behind that and also why it was a recommendation in for Area C, Village of Pemberton and Lillooet, and not for Area D, Squamish and Squamish Nation.
Yeah, for sure. So it was basically because of concerns that were brought up by Pemberton Fire Rescue in the committee meeting we had. I think it was the first committee meeting we had, actually. So that it basically, they are, I guess, because the Pemberton Fire Rescue responds outside of municipal boundaries, they are often called to non-compliant campfires, but they have no ability to enforce the provincial fire ban, which basically is what applies outside of municipal Village of Pemberton municipal boundaries, if that makes sense. So the SLRD doesn't have resources to enforce provincial fire bans, and that which is what applies outside of the Village of Pemberton. And conservation officer time is obviously limited. So what I heard is that Pemberton Fire Rescue is called to these fires, but they can't really, require people to extinguish them. It's not their jurisdiction. And so, we didn't delve into this problem in great detail, but it was highlighted as something to solve, and obviously something that requires a lot of interagency communication and kind of figuring out what resources are required to achieve that.
That's helpful. I'm wondering if Director Morgan or Mr. Fuska can speak to whether that would be a similar, it's my understanding that would be a similar issue, pardon me, in like the Squamish Valley area with Squamish Fire, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's a little different in the Squamish Valley in that in the Pemberton Meadows area, there is a service agreement with Pemberton Fire Rescue. So they have jurisdiction there, whereas Squamish Fire Rescue does not have jurisdiction beyond the municipal boundaries at this time. So there is effectively no fire service to that area.
Okay, and I have a question from Director Elliott and then Director Demare.
Thank you for the presentation. One of the questions I have is that our municipalities have plans, the SLRD has plans, and we're all applying for funding to take care of the interface zones and clear brush and figure out treatment areas. What is the table that gets coordinated so that Squamish Area D are working together and applying for the same high risk area, because we all border each other. So what is the table and where does that happen?
Is your question in regards to, the Ministry of Forests basically having more of a handle on the overlaps, or just how it's overseen right now?
I think I'm trying to understand how our staff coordinate, but also some of it is Crown land. So how do we coordinate with the province? So there's high risk areas that are on the borders of municipalities and electoral areas that we would want to address all at the same time. So how does that happen? How does that coordination happen?
So most of these fuel management prescriptions are funded through the UBCM Firesmart Community Funding and Supports Program, and that applications are reviewed by that program, and finalized projects are submitted to the program, and so they do maintain a database, and that is actually publicly available. You can go on Data BC or Data Catalog, and you can download for your study area. You could download like what treatments and prescriptions have been completed through that program. It was a weakness this year that the areas that the ministry themselves had taken on through the Crown Land Wildfire Risk Reduction Program, those weren't included in that area. And there was some unfortunate overlapping that occurred. But I believe that they have started to integrate those areas into this public database. This is just something I saw a couple weeks ago, so I haven't looked into it fully. But yeah, it would basically be through the funding agency that it's been sort of tracked up till now.
And then from a staff perspective, how do we proactively plan for that? So if we're applying for UVCM funds in Squamish, does our emergency management team coordinate with the SLRD to see if there's an opportunity to address an area in Area D at the same time through the same funding stream?
Chair, I can speak to that. Part of this speaks to the recommendation of establishing fuel management tables that would actually bring us together. Thus far, it's been done kind of informally. So we have our regional emergency preparedness committees with emergency planning staff from District Squamish and the district, as well as Squamish Nation. And then we also bring in and coordinate with staff at the Ministry of Forests, Sea to Sky District, because they hold responsibility for wildfire risk reduction on Crown land. But the recommendation in the CWRP is to come at this in basically a much more robust and structured way by way of these fuel management tables, because we know that, as you say, these treatment units or potential treatment units that benefit multiple jurisdictions can be highlighted and prioritized as such. So we appreciate that it's in our best interest to work more closely together, and that's a recommendation of this report.
Thank you.
And final question, Director Demare.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious of the maps that were created. Did you work with the Sea to Sky Forest District and have their threat maps? Is that where you got it from?
Yeah, so we used as a starting point the Sea to Sky District threat maps. I think you're referring to the provincial strategic threat analysis, those PSDA layers. Yeah, that's what we start with, and that's kind of that guides where we will prioritize when we're doing our field work. But because that threat analysis is not based on the ground data, it's based on the vegetation resource inventory, which can be wrong. We update our own fuel type layer, and then we run our own threat analysis. So it's a different threat analysis than the PSTA, but it should be more fine scale and more up to date.
Okay, I've got a question for Sarah. Next year, we're going to hopefully get a SLRD fire chief. And what is that position's engagement going to be with what we're talking about here, Firesmart and fuel mitigation? Because one of the recommendations was a Firesmart, either part-time or full-time.
Thank you. So through the chair, we do already have a contract Firesmart coordinator. So at the moment, we're taking up that recommendation through contract staff. And we have funding again this year for that service to be provided through that contract mechanism. The regional fire chief at this point is not anticipated to be responsible for Firesmart per se, but they will be actively involved for sure.
Okay. Yeah, it was really just disappointing to have the community wildfire protection plans developed and then not be usable. I think that was in 2018, 2019. And now we've got a new version of it. I kind of like this new version. And I'm looking forward to Area A and Area B's final report. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Zemanek, for being here today and for your presentation and for the excellent work that you've done so far. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. And thank you, Director Morgan and Mr. Fuska, for being here today and supporting the presentation. And we'll let you go.
Thank you for having me.
We are moving back into our regular agenda to 9.1, CEO verbal update.
Thanks, Madam Chair, nothing further to add.
Okay. I'll take a minute just to welcome you in open to the regional district. We're grateful that you've come to join us, and we look forward to all the amazing work that we'll carry on.
Thanks, in the open, very, very pleased to be here and have the opportunity to work with the board, with staff, and with the various communities across the regional district.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to 9.2, the new electronics delegation policy and updated electronic meetings policy. Are we just moving these repeal and separately?
Yeah, that'd be great, please.
Question?
Yeah, so in the policy for the delegations, it says that the delegation who wish to attend by electronic facility should provide as much notice as possible to the CAO. And that struck me as strange, because why would our CAO deal with delegations and not someone in ledge services? Like, that seems like something that would be delegated down.
I think that that is very good catch. We should probably, if we're gonna implement a new policy, we should probably have the language correct so that it's not going right to your desk, and I'm sure it gets there eventually, but.
Yeah, and perhaps, Christy, my understanding is this reflects the current practice. And so I guess there are a couple of ways to do that. One is for us to have some time to review those processes as part of sort of coming on board and having a look at that, or to try and deal with it here. And I would recommend the former. I'm comfortable with the current processes as they exist, but intend to look at those, understand why we do things the way we do, and where changes need to be made, make them. But, yeah.
So just to follow up, because in the next item, our procedure bylaw update, it says that delegation should connect with the corporate office. But the electronic request says the CAO. So there isn't a match there in my mind.
Sorry, I'm not sure where the second one, where you're referring to this, to the next report.
Where we talk about electronic meeting provisions in the procedure bylaw.
So sorry, I'm just not, so in that, so in the 9.3 report you're referring to, if you can just point me to where in that report it references the corporate officer. I'm sorry, I'm not.
Just now you're gonna have to go on the link and find it.
It's like right at it's on page 2, key information. For regular meetings of the board and special meetings of the board, the corporate officer is required to be physical. Oh, no, sorry, wrong spot. Just had it.
All right, section 4.17. Delegation may be placed on the agenda to address the board, provided that a written application containing details of the matter to be presented has been received by the corporate officer not less than 6 days prior to the meeting for insertion in the agenda package. So the request is going to the corporate officer, but then if you want to appear electronically, it has to go to the CAO.
Yeah, and again, it's just, this was just getting something in place as a place, like I haven't done a full review, unfortunately. This was just updating for the current hybrid situation we're in. And also with respect to that language of corporate officer in the procedure bylaw, the CAO is the deputy corporate officer. So there are some duties that fall to the corporate officer or the deputy corporate officer. So it's that's where we are now. We are due for a procedure bylaw review when that can be slotted in.
Isn't this just a minor wording change in a policy? So if our procedure bylaw, which is the one we have been following, says corporate officer, why would we then for delegations now move that to the CAO, who will then just delegate it? There's a difference between approving a delegation and then doing the logistics of the delegation, electronic or in person, which is not the role of the CAO. Right. So even if this is a stopgap measure, it just seems not a very strategic use of time.
Yeah.
But if the CAO wants to forward these messages on, that's fine, but.
I think we're gonna go through a more fulsome review and alignment process between these policies so that everything makes a lot more sense and more efficient. But I think it was just like for like at this point, just to get the policy updated. So.
I'm sorry, I haven't gone through the process yet. I don't know how it works practically, but I would say that, like with every process, we'll take a look at it, and if it's confusing to the public or delegates that are applying, then we'll need to make sure it's clear.
Seems to me if we're not going to be considering this, providing direction and making edits right now, then maybe we should just refer it to a future meeting rather than bring back a different report. This report's been sort of structured to be presented to the board for their input, and we're asked for a repeal and approval, and then the next one we're asked for our direction. So I feel like if it's understandable that it's not ready to make edits like what Director Elliott's suggesting, but I do think our job is to provide input and make changes if it's required, and if now's not the time, that's fine. See it at a future meeting. With that, I'd probably just move deferral to a future meeting rather than have a different report come back.
Does that make sense?
I'm good with that. Are you okay with that?
Or the change can be made. If you would like it to go through the corporate officer, this can be done.
Okay.
You know, that's fine. It's just not what we've usually been doing, but we all work together to make it happen. So that's fine as well.
That's why I would support the deferral piece, just because it does reflect what's actually happening, good, bad, or otherwise, and maybe a bit of soak time to look at that and then come back after having that opportunity would be better for the board to consider that.
I'm happy to move deferral.
Okay, moved, seconded.
Just ask another question.
Sure.
Is there a reason we need to rescind and approve something today to enable our hybrid existence? I feel like there was a reason we were rescinding something.
I feel like we set a deadline of March for that review.
Right.
This is a little bit different.
Okay.
This is just because our current delegations policy doesn't contemplate an electronic delegation.
So we actually need something in place.
The point was just to get something in place. It's not perfect, but it reflects what's currently been going on and will tide us through until a greater review can be done.
Are you comfortable seconding the deferral?
Sure.
Okay.
I thought the corporate officer needed us to put something in place, so the deferral doesn't make sense, but it's the will of the board, so.
Anyone on the screen wish to speak to this? Or anyone else in the room? Go ahead.
Why don't we approve it with a comment that it come back to the board for one review, for a final review. And now that way you get a chance to look at them and make recommendations.
Okay.
Because we need to have this in place.
Yeah.
It's not a big one right now, I don't think. So that would be my motion. Well, mind you, we got a.
So we're
you already
really
got a
messing
motion.
with the plan.
You've got a
but
motion
here we go.
already, unless you want to amend your motion.
We had virtual presentations today without this policy, so I'm behind the deferral. I'll be voting in favor of the deferral.
Okay. We had it moved, we had it seconded, with reservations. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the deferral? Director Rich Jones and Director Demare opposed, motion carries.
Can I make a comment?
Sure. Is it gonna,
Yeah.
no, well, okay.
Yeah, for the areas up in the north, just makes it harder. They'd have to drive down here to do a presentation and it could be done virtually. That's my comment.
Go ahead.
Well, we don't need to debate again, but
Yeah.
Director Crompton said we had virtual delegations today, so
We're
clearly
doing
it's
it.
happening.
Yeah.
And it will continue to happen at
Okay.
the behest of the delegation requesting it, so.
Okay, so 9.2 has been deferred. 9.3 is the electronic meeting provisions in the procedures bylaw. Is there time sensitivity? Or shall we defer this as well for the bigger review?
Yeah, there's no time sensitivity. There was just a date attached to the board resolution, which was by the end of December or such later date directed by the chair. So it was brought back. We've only had, that was passed in October. I think we thought we'd be up and running a little bit sooner, but we only had our first in truly hybrid meeting in January. So it's all very new and we're still working out the final pieces. And I also am constrained with doing that review. So bringing it back at a later date would be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have someone make the motion to defer. Moved by Director Crompton, second by Director Weed. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right, this should be an easy one. We're on 9.4. We're looking for the appointment of the chief electoral officer or election officer and deputy chief election officer as laid out in the package. Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Weeb. Comments or questions? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Right. 9.5. Proposed revision to the board policy. This is a language update regarding soil deposit.
Ms. Needham, Sarah, I don't know if she wants to.
Do you want to speak to this one?
No, not necessary if, unless someone wants me to speak.
Okay, did anybody have any questions about 9.5? Director Birch Jones, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. When I was reading it, I thought, could this be honed down a little bit, like get rid of some of the wording? Just like reading it, upon receipt of an application from the blah, blah, staff will forward. This is 5.1 to the applicable SLRD Agricultural Advisory Committee (AAC), if any. And I understand we don't have AACs in all of our areas, but then if possible for input. And I thought that is really a kind of a confusing sentence, and it sort of gets worse as you go through it. I mean, you can live with this, it does make sense, but I just wonder if we could have just a little clearer, shorter wording so that people don't get confused when they read it, as I certainly did the first time through. As appropriate, for example. Like, if possible, it's depending on what, and I just really thought it was less clear than clear.
Thank you, Director Birch Jones. Director Elliott?
One of the questions I had is if the AAC makes a recommendation and the board disagrees with that recommendation, staff want both of those opinions to go to the ALC.
Is that our current practice?
No, currently, only the board's decision goes to the ALC.
Yeah, through the chair. There was some confusion at a meeting 2 meetings ago related to this provision. It was to do with the Lillooet application. So there was some confusion about whether AAC minutes go to the ALC. So this amendment would basically put all information that comes through the SLRD to the ALC portal. Just for clarity.
But that's staff's preference, so when there's disagreement between the AAC and the board, staff still want both of those things posted to the portal. That's where the root of this change came from. The board felt it was important that their decision was the one that went to the ALC.
Right. Director Mack, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, please. Haven't we already been through this previously whereby we decided that the only thing that would go forward to the ALC was the board's decision, whatever that may be? And I'm sure Director Crompton remembers this discussion that we had, because I think he was very adamant that that's what we should be doing. And I completely agree. If we as a board disagree with an AAC decision, that's for us to know that. We don't have to send this all off to the ALR or the Agricultural Land Commission, just so that then they look at us going, don't you guys know what you're doing? Like, who's in charge there, sort of thing. So I think that only the board decision should be going forward, and let the ALC make their decision based on the decision that we make as a board. We're the elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mack. Director Crompton?
This resulted because a staff report that opposed an application was appended to a board recommendation to support. And the ALC, in their decisions, decided to reject the application based on our staff report. And it seems this is classic downloading. Like the provincial, like the ALC is using our planning staff to do their work and not providing us any funding to get that work done. And so if they wanted to fund our planning department, we'd be happy to take their money, but I don't think they do. And therefore, what we submit to them, in my view, should reflect the will of the board. And I think that that should be true of the report that goes to the ALC as well. It should support the direction that this board gives to the ALC. And if they'd like to do other work and discover other problems that may exist, they have staff and they have access to the provincial government and can maybe go get funding themselves. Is my opinion.
Thank you. Director Newman.
So the ALC portal requests that we provide all information, and it's mandatory that we provide the staff report and the board resolution. But they would like all applicable information on the file to get uploaded to the portal.
I don't need to go back and forth with staff, but I'll say this. If our resolution says support this application, we should have an appended report that supports the application. We should not be sending into the ALC, support this application with a counterpoint in a staff report. I think that that is simply not the right way our organization should operate. What this board says should direct what reports go into government, in my view.
Director Mack, go ahead.
I completely agree with what Director Crompton just said. Like I say, it puts the board, I think, in a bad light. If we're recommending something to go forward, staff's recommending it doesn't go forward, then the people at the ALC are looking back at us going, don't these people have their act together? Like, what's going on here? So I absolutely agree with what Director Crompton is saying. The direction of the board is all that should go forward to the ALC. We're the ones that make the decision on what the information coming forward to us is. There shouldn't be a contentious report going to the ALC to look like there's a disagreement, between our staff and the board. It doesn't make sense to me. Thank you.
I'll go to Director Elliott and then I'll come back to you, Director Needham. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think it's important for us to remember in this discussion is that we have a professional staff and we expect them to bring forward their opinion on how to proceed. And sometimes the board will agree with that and sometimes we won't. But when we don't agree, we don't get them to go back and rewrite the report on something that was on our agenda, even if we take a different direction. So I think there's a process question here about if there's disagreement and the board goes in a different direction than the staff report, I still think our reasons for going in that different direction should be appended to what is delivered to the LC. But I'm not sure that we should be asking our staff to change their opinion, because we rely on their independent advice and we can agree with it or not. But as long as the report, if we go in a different direction, we get an opportunity to add to our, why we varied from the staff so that the ALC can see that too. Then I think that respects their job, which is to provide their best independent advice to us as a board, but it allows us to say, here at ALC are the reasons we decided to not agree with our staff in this regard. And these are the things that we feel are important as elected officials, which is why we've gone in this direction. I just think it's a slippery slope when we start to say to our staff, well, now you have to agree with us and submit a report that says that. So we've got to find the balance in this. And maybe it's a longer conversation that we could put to a committee of the whole so that we take the confusion out of it. But I don't want to say to our staff, like, it's agree or it doesn't go in kind of thing.
Right.
That feels like a wrong direction.
Yeah. I saw your hand, but Director Needham.
Yeah, just to clarify, so yes, we write our own professional reports and we propose our opinions and we will not change our opinions because the board asked us to, because we have professional obligations to uphold. We have been asked to not include AAC minutes as an appendix to the report. And I think that's where the concern was, because we had our staff report plus an AAC report, which is a committee of the board. And if perhaps that AAC report didn't support the application, there was concern that if that was attached to the staff report, then it would look bad. So we no longer attach AAC reports to our staff reports. Those go to the board separately as committee minutes. So we don't include that anymore. So yes, we may have different opinions, but as I said, it is both the staff report and the ultimate board decision through a board resolution that gets uploaded to the portal. And those are mandatory.
We have no option. Yeah,
that's right.
Director Crompton.
I think Director Elliott's correct. I also think then we should just upload the staff report and let the ALC decide. Seriously, because that's what they're doing. They are looking at the staff report and they're making their decision, and they really don't care what this board thinks. And so we're being asked for our opinion as the board that is here, and they are just, as I said before, without giving us funding, accessing the professional opinions of our staff and ignoring the input that we may have as a board. And I don't think that's a good future, and I disagree strongly. It was not the AAC minutes that they took into consideration. They clearly articulated that it was details in the staff report that directed the decision that they made. So we made a recommendation to approve something, I forget what it was, and they came back and denied it based on the information in our staff report. If that's the direction we're going, then I understand, because I would not want to ask our staff to adjust reports. I think that you're correct. I missed on that one, and I wouldn't want our professional staff to be changing their reports. But certainly, if we are going to make statements as a board of a direction that we want to go, I don't think we should be undermining ourselves with appended reports that say exactly the opposite when we're sending them out to other agencies. I just don't think that makes a ton of sense.
So for clarity, the staff recommended resolution would eliminate the second paragraph of 5.2, which says AAC meeting minutes will not be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission. And for further clarity, staff will not upload AAC minutes to the Agricultural Land Committee's online portal. And I think that's the part where the board was sensitive to say that. So why do staff feel we should eliminate that paragraph?
Through the chair, it's just in the interest of the ALC wanting full information. And there was some confusion at the last meeting about that paragraph. And that's what led to this report. But it's sounding to me as though, with respect to the recommendations, the board would like to see that third "that" be removed from the recommendations, which is to do with the AAC minutes being uploaded.
Yeah, if I recall the previous conversation, AAC minutes were attached to the staff report. The staff report went to the AAC. We disagreed with staff, came back, and it was rejected by the ALC based on the staff report, which included the AAC minutes. And so then the board made a decision to receive AAC minutes in our agenda, which we do now separately, and that they're not appended to staff reports. So if we want to stick with that, then we would lose that third "that" in the resolution. If we want to go back to having the minutes also uploaded from AAC, we would agree with the motion in front of us.
Yeah, makes sense.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
Just speaking of this, I think we should probably also send a letter to the ALC asking for funding. Seriously, that make me feel so happy. So.
I don't think we can contemplate that today, but
Chair?
I have Director Elliott, then Director Mack. Go ahead.
I'll move the first two "that" statements.
Okay. And seconded by Director Crompton. Director Mack?
I didn't quite hear what Director Elliott said.
So she's moving the first two "that's" so that we amend the board policy to refer to an application, and that we amend the board policy to change the requirement from an information report to a direction request, but is excluding the third "that" regarding deletion of the second paragraph of board policy 5.2.
So therefore, the AAC will only come to the board. Their recommendations won't go to the ALC, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move along to 9.6, regarding, this is a request for decision regarding SLRD reopening plan. Thank you, Director Needham.
Thanks.
And
Ms. Walensky.
Ms. Walensky, welcome.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. This report is to approve the 2 COVID-19 related policies that were put in place with the SLRD, the reopening plan and the communicable disease prevention plan policy. So the main updates to the policy, the reopening plan policy, just some dates have been updated. We are currently in stage 3B of our reopening plan. That started on February 23rd, 2022, which is the date that hybrid meetings with directors in person, as well as electronically, was fully operational. The province announced some additional restrictions back in January when there was a surge in COVID. So the SLRD re-implemented its COVID-19 safety plan in conjunction with the communicable disease prevention plan that was put in place in September of 2021. So it's been quite a changeable situation, and these board policies have just been modified based on provincial recommendations and orders. The main changes to the communicable disease prevention plan are the removal of mask requirement at the SLRD office. And we did have some additional procedures in the workplace here at the SLRD that included the staff completing a daily COVID checklist before they came to work each day. That was an over and above policy that we had in place at the office. The office here at the SLRD remains low risk. So we have removed some of the measures that were previously in place, including the mask requirement, the daily checklist, physical distancing requirements, and capacity limits in some of the public areas, including this boardroom. I think that is it. Does anyone have any questions or?
Director Elliott, go ahead.
I'm curious about whether this being a board policy gives you the nimbleness you need to change the policy when the PHO changes orders. And I wonder if it's time to make this a staff policy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think, like,
He speaks.
over the last, so things have changed quite a bit over, they've evolved over the last 2 years. Back in the last time these 2 reports were brought to the board, the risk was a little bit higher, and at the staff level, there was a heightened level of concern just among staff and safety and that kind of thing. So, but we have good, staff are keeping an eye on provincial recommendations, and along with the help of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee, we are able to assess internally, our operations here and recommend and make those changes. So if it is the board's desire to maybe convert some of these policies to like CAO level or CAO policies.
I'll make that resolution.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just wondering what wording we would add to this motion to make that happen, because I think once we get to the fall, we could be in another very changeable situation, and we're not on the ground here. The CAO is here with the staff, and they should be able to just implement what they need to. And the board should review these, on an ad hoc basis, or just I feel like our job is just to know that we have them and our staff are safe. Other than that, I feel like the CAO should be able to approve these. So if there's wording we can add to this, because it says at the back, be brought back as required. And I didn't know whether that was enough to say it's really, how do we make it a staff policy?
Could we add a fifth that the policies herein are delegated to the authority of the CAO?
That certainly works for me, unless there's some procedural issue with that, but that makes sense to me.
I'll move that recommendation.
People fighting over the. I thought I already did.
Well, it wasn't officially acknowledged by the
Okay.
chair, therefore, Director Mack and seconded by Director Weave. Is there any further comments or questions? On the screen? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not that we don't love seeing you, but I'm sure. we
It's not
can-
about this anymore. Thank you.
Okay. We're on 9.7, Sea to Sky Trail South Extension Terrain and Land Use Assessment Report. Hi,
Alison McDonald, Parks and Trails Coordinator. This information report includes an assessment of the various potential routes of the Sea to Sky Trail from Squamish south to Lions Bay. It was brought about last year by Cascade Environmental after board resolution directing staff to carry out the report. It's really high level mapping, so it's actually quite accurate. It's a great report starting point. None of this work is in our work plan yet, but we do have future. We do now have a plan to move ahead with the trail. So I know you guys are time crunch, so but the follow-up would us to do more ground truthing and that sort of thing before we move into construction or planning construction.
Okay. Any questions? Director Crompton.
So this is very route based, like the focus is on what's achievable. I really liked some of this is difficult, but there are some low-hanging fruit. Like I thought that was wonderful. Is there a time where sort of the tourism impact opportunity of a complete trail and sort of the global aspect of this rather than the ground piece is taken on, or has that already been done? Like, have you already thought through that work?
The tourism potential of the different sections, or as the trail
The
as a
whole thing, yeah.
That's a little bit out of
Scope.
my scope, actually.
Because I feel like if this was ever a thing and it was complete, it's not a nice thing that happens in the Sea to Sky. It becomes like sort of on the list of the world places to hike. And like Cinque Terre, the Camino, those kind of things. Like I think it becomes massive. I've already had people like the Catholic community approach me in Whistler and say, if this trail was finished, we probably would be promoting it more globally. So I like the work being done on the smaller scale at some point, considering it at the global scale, and then maybe taking it to the Ministry of Tourism or someone and saying, we've done a bunch of work, we've understood the economic opportunity a bit. Do you have any interest in chasing this down with us? Might be worth someone's time, but it seems like it's different in scope than what you're doing right now.
It is, we're focused on the route,
Yeah.
just getting it done. The Sea to Sky Trail Master Plan adopted in 2009 did look at those big picture, did compare to the Camino and the Route Vert in Quebec and those sorts of large, and the tourism potential, but there's no sort of economic studies or those sorts of things in the trail.
Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions, Director Elliott?
This is really exciting to see at least that it's possible with some technical challenges here and there. So we've been mostly focused on the northern part of the trail. And so how does this now move into the prioritization, given we still got some big chunks that aren't finished?
And the parts we're working on are known as phase 1 in the plan, and this would be a phase 2. And we're not complete. Phase 1 isn't complete. But that being said, having this plan we could look for direction from the board to sort of look at prioritizing those low-hanging fruit sections, or how you would want to see it play out, and we could work it into future work plans. We have a couple of sections of the Sea to Sky on this summer's work plan, but it still won't be complete, but it's, you know, it's getting closer.
So would like a direction request to look at furthering the work of the Cascade Environmental Plan in the 2023 budget cycle? That kind of vague direction would be enough. I just don't want to.
Would you like some vague direction?
Well, I don't want to dictate the work, because I think there are some low-hanging fruit, and that first one from Loggers Lane to Shannon Falls is an amazing tourism asset, and would get not only locals but tourists out of their cars to spaces that don't have sufficient parking lots. So, but it, you know, it still needs to be ground truth. You need someone to walk the route and figure it out. So that's kind of why I want to keep it vague, but at least move it into the realm that even some preliminary work could start to get done while we finish the phase 1 projects. That's my thinking.
Go ahead.
I hate to ask this one too. I agree. I think that that's wise. I also think the advantage of your sort of dual track piece of like what's achievable and quick and gives us big, and then the global one allows us to incorporate it into planning in ways that are pretty important, I think, in the long run, like Britannia, which I think we are, but I'd love to see that kind of thing. Does this resolution give you that, or would it need to be?
This is an information report, so.
It's true. That's very good.
Are you looking for?
So, I'm not the sharpest knife.
But you're colorful.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe we need to, would direction be helpful right now, or no?
Direction to maybe.
The Shannon Falls piece.
The Shannon Falls piece. I think would be helpful. Direction to
Vague,
maybe get a
make
quote
it
on
really
further
gray.
work, or
We don't want to put this into like a get it done right away kind of resolution.
No, I think it's a prioritization of really low hanging fruit amongst other low hanging fruit. Like it seems to me like that is the.
Should we refer it to that EAD prioritization conversation at the next EAD meeting? No?
No. Do you have a
More
resolution?
global than that? Future committee level?
Were you gonna say
I'll
something?
just ask a question if I might.
Certainly.
It's the aim of the resolution. Like, what do we need the resolution to do that we can't do? I'm just trying to understand.
I think it's to dig a little deeper into the, especially the Loggers Lane section and possibly other sections to develop a timeline and construction schedule, permitting requirements, and so we have a better idea of how long it would take to get them built.
Yeah, sorry, I'll stop. That's something I would typically just, if that's squeezable inside a work plan, inside of current priorities. If it's not, then we need to know, but typically that would be a conversation we just go have. So I'm just trying to understand, just asking to understand why we would need a resolution to do work that we might be doing.
Go ahead, Director Elliott.
I think through the chair, I respect the fact that we've laid this out as sort of phase 1 and there's a phase 2, but we're a bit stuck on some of the phase 1s. There's some land issues, there's some other technical challenges to achieve. In the meantime, does that mean we have to wait on everything that would be in the Squamish to Lions Bay section? So that's why I'm sort of seeing if we can get out from sort of finishing phase 1, because there's definitely some good preliminary work to do on phase 2. I think not this year, next year, but not to leave this just sitting on the shelf and saying it has to wait until we finish phase 1. So if staff are willing to proceed without direction on actioning some of this, I just wanted to make sure that it doesn't have to wait until everything in phase 1 is done. So that's where I'm willing to hear from the board on that.
What if you, for this year alone, got a quote from Cascades on how much it would cost to develop a plan for that section? just a quote, how much it's gonna cost to actually do all this work? That way you can come back to us with it
Right,
and we could make a decision from there.
for next year's budget.
Yeah. That's moving forward. And I'd just like to make a comment about Cascades Environmental. Of course, one of the owners has property on Gun Lake and Dave Williamson, and they do phenomenal work, and quite impressed for $8,000 what we got here.
There's a lot of value.
Because they've got so much data. It's tremendous. And now we're collecting data up in our area through that same company.
They've always been really
Yeah.
extra helpful when it comes to the Sea to Sky Trail.
Try to speak less than 4 times to one item, but this was in answer to the CAO's question. We've previously been a bit micromanaging on this in that there was the Friendship Trail, which was seen as a real, it wasn't sort of continuous with what had already been built, but it had real opportunity and impact to existing communities, and it linked Pemberton to Mount Curry, and we thought, good idea to get this done, even though we haven't finished everything that links to it. And so I think that this would sort of be similar to that in that it would say, yeah, there is opportunities here that aren't necessarily connected to continuity of the whole trail at this point, which I just wanted to add that we have a history of doing this, kind of hands in the mud.
I know, but I won't do it, but
It's kind of fun.
So I think the motion, as I've understood it, is to receive the report for information and to request a quote from Cascade so that we can understand it for the budget of this particular small little section. Moved by Director Damaris, seconded by Director Elliott.
that section being 2 Shannon Falls.
2 Shannon Falls from Waters.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone on the screen? For those on the screen, my computer just disconnected me. That's why you can no longer see my face, but I'm still here in the room. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, it is 2:34. Oh my goodness. We have a regional hospital district meeting starting 4 minutes ago. So we will recess this open meeting of the board and we will commence the regional hospital district meeting. I don't think it will be very long. I'm sure we will see you again. Yes.
Can we not recess the hospital district meeting?
Can we do that?
Open it, recess, come back to this one?
How does Kristen feel about that?
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Creative governance.
Gosh, you have.
That sounds sketchy. Totally.
That's not a topic.
Let's just go with it.
covered.
Sketchy governance.
No, that was above board. That's procedurally correct.
Are you sure you're not Gray?
Okay. Okay, so for the sake of those that are not a part of the regional hospital district, shall I call this meeting to order and then recess it? Is that procedurally what you'd like me to do? Okay, I'm gonna call this meeting of the Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District to order and acknowledge that we are grateful to be on the traditional territory of the Lillooet Nation and all of the First Nations within our regional boundaries. And I will call for the approval of the agenda, moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Crompton. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And now I'll call a recess of this meeting. Am I okay with that? Keep going or no? Go back. Reopen the public meeting.
Yep, can I just, I'm not sure if Director Mack is with us.
Oh, Director Mack. Director Stoner, go ahead.
I'm also not sure that Director Birch Jones followed what was happening. I think she may have. Oh no. Oh, she is here. Okay.
No, you were Director Stoner. Thank you. No, completely lost. I was planning on the 2:30 break and I think I'll take it. So I'm just waiting to hear what we're doing with our regular meeting.
Sorry about that. We did talk about that, you and I. I'm sorry. There's desire in the room to finish our open agenda. That's the objective. Postpone the rest of this. Or was it for staff's?
I just want to, sorry, Chair, I just wanted to continue with the regular board meeting and we can finish the regional hospital district later.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to go into the regional hospital district board meeting, recess it,
Yeah.
come back to the regular meeting, and then if you want to take a recess, that'd be at your.
Oh, I was only recessing the hospital district.
But if you wanted to give us like a 10-minute break.
We can give you a 10-minute
Okay.
break. Everyone take a 10-minute break. Come back at 2:47. Everyone good? You good, Viv? 10-minute break?
I'll be back in about an hour. Thank you.
She'll be back in an hour.
She had. I'll just text her. I'm sure it was.
Okay, we're live.
Okay. Everyone back with us on the screen. Let's see your lovely faces. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, Russell's not back. Leslie's not back. There's Russell. There's Jenna.
Everybody's having a snack.
Leslie, are you back? Well, we'll go on and she can join us when she's with us. Okay, we will go back to 9.8. This is an information report regarding the Braylon water main relocation design.
Good afternoon, Angela Belsham, Director of Environmental Services. The purpose of the report before you is to provide information with regard to the Braylon water main relocation design, which was completed by True Consulting. True Consulting engineers have investigated the costs associated with relocating a piece of water main, which is aging infrastructure, so that the service connections can be moved to the front of the properties and within the Ministry of Transportation right of way. The estimated costs are more than what the small cost center can bear. And SLRD is currently looking for infrastructure grants to help support the project. Any infrastructure projects will attempt to be aligned with MOTI road resurfacing that may be scheduled within the area. So there is not any overlap in what's happening there. And staff will continue to support the ongoing meetings that the area director has been having with MOTI in respect to the road resurfacing in that area. Are there any questions?
Well, thank you for the report. Ms. Belson?
Any questions from anyone on the screen? Seeing none.
I'll move receipt.
Move receipt of the information report, seconded by Director Weed. Further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks. And now we're back to Ms. McDonald with the active transportation grant regarding the Friendship Trail.
Thank you. This report is recommending a letter of support for the Village of Pemberton's application for the Active Transportation Fund up to an amount of $401,000 to complete the section of the Friendship Trail along Pemberton Farm Road East. The board had previously allocated $92,000 from the Sea to Sky Trail Cost Center as a matching portion of a previous infrastructure grant to the province, but as this is a new grant and it's a federal grant, different program, we're asking for that funding to be reallocated to the new federal program. The village was unsuccessful in their provincial applications. They made a couple of applications, but so we're still looking for funding for that piece. I'm happy to answer any questions about this.
Any questions? Okay. Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Director Zant, and then I've got Director Mayor.
If there's no questions, I'll make a motion.
Okay, I'll just go to Director Demare for a question and then I'll come back to you for the motions.
Thank you.
I was going to move it.
You're gonna move it. Did you want to make a different motion than is laid out, Director Zant?
Just what's on the report, just to support.
Okay, thank you. But it's to support, it's to rescind and then reallocate, right? Yeah. Okay, so moved by Director Zant, seconded by Director Demare. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
9.10. This is the business case for sale and use of the Lillooet River sediment. Or is this just
We should have somebody here for this. I'm not sure who.
Okay.
Off the top of my head. Kristen, you know who's on?
That's Sarah and Mike.
Oh, okay, they're in the waiting room now.
Okay,
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Mike Fuska.
thank you. We're on 9.10, talking about the Lillooet River sediment. I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair and Board. Again, my name is Mike Fuska. I'm an emergency management technician with the Protective Services Department. And today I'm here to present this RFD related to the report that was recently written for us by Clear Course Consulting. Pardon me, I'm just... by way of background, this report is related to the 2010 Mount Meager landslide in the vicinity of Capricorn Creek. That landslide has since then has been putting quite a bit of sediment in the Lillooet River, and it's been causing channel aggradation that's been negatively affecting the flood protection infrastructure in the Pemberton Valley. Specifically, flood protection infrastructure that was designed to protect from a 1 in 200 year flood was found when Northwest Hydraulic Consulting did their assessment in 2018. They found that the sediment is causing that flood protection infrastructure to not be sufficient for a 1 in 50 year flood when it was designed for a 1 in 200. This sediment that's taking up the space inside the river channels, getting rid of that is a priority for us. And last year, we received some grant funding from the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, their Rural Dividend Fund, to develop a business case to try and extract this sediment and at the very least break even on it from a cost capture perspective. So as I mentioned, we hired Clear Course Consulting to look into this, and we've been doing this in partnership with Pemberton Valley Diking District. And Clear Course Consulting, they basically they said, well, if we pull the sediment out and sold it without doing any refinement of that sediment at all, then we're probably not going to break even on cost capture for the cost of extracting that sediment. But they said that if we do a simple processing, well, then we could potentially actually gain a return on investment. And if we went and did some extensive processing of the sediment, then it could potentially be quite lucrative. Now, there's some caveats with that. Well, for one thing, to actually refine the sediment would take a significant investment of capital infrastructure to actually extract the sediment from the Lillooet River, to refine it and to bring it to market. We would also want to look at, if there would be any unintended consequences of actually putting that much sediment into the market on our own and how that would affect local businesses. And also, we'd want to look at potential partnerships and other sources of funding. We recognize that the Pemberton Valley has, SLRD, Village of Pemberton, and Lillooet Nation. So maybe there's opportunity here for everyone to work together and draw on different funding sources to actually see this plan into action. So as described in the report, the next step in the process here is one, for the board to receive the report. And then once we've done that, then we could present it to our Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee for that partner review. And then after that, we would have to do likely a more detailed options analysis where we would actually look at funding sources, the cost of capital infrastructure that would take to actually refine the sediment and potentially turn a profit. And that would be done in conjunction with further analysis of the sediment beyond what we've already done. So that's kind of the wave tops of this RFD, and the report itself is included with the agenda for your review, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent, thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Anyone on the screen?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Mack.
Yeah, I actually think this is a great idea. I had actually brought this up with the previous Diking District manager probably 4 or 5 years ago now, when we were looking at all this sediment. And I had been over to Seashell, and the Seashell band, they have a huge gravel pit there. They ship their product all up and down the West Coast, and it's a very lucrative business. So I mentioned that to Steve Flynn at the time, saying that, maybe partnering with Lillooet or whoever would be a good way to go. But anyways, like I say, I fully support this idea. The fact of the matter is that sediment is going to keep coming down probably forever. So in order to keep your channel open and clear, it's going to have to be done. So why not try to recover the money or make money on it? Growing up in Richmond, the Fraser River is dredged continuously, and it's no different. These rivers should be the same. You just have to get fisheries on side and whoever else is involved, and get rid of some of the, all the stipulations before you can do it. But it's an ongoing process that it'll go on forever. So it needs to be started. So very good on you guys for doing this and getting this program started. And I fully support it. So very good. Thank you.
Okay. Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Fuska, what would you consider to be next steps?
Well, recognizing the interjurisdictional implications of this project would definitely be to share with our partners through the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee. We recognize that it's a hazard that affects everyone, and as such, everyone ought to be a stakeholder. I personally think, and that's the direction where our staff recommendation is taking us. And we also recognize that also opens up opportunities with particular, using land. And if we were to purchase, equipment to actually refine this, it could be an employment opportunity that could affect, other jurisdictions in the Pemberton Valley, and as well as Lillooet Nation. And if it took some money to purchase that equipment up front, then maybe other partners in the Pemberton Valley have access to funding opportunities that maybe we don't have. So in short, the next step is to share this information and determine what are the open questions we still need to be answered, and then potentially commission some kinds of options analysis to have those questions answered, and that would be the next step in driving this forward.
I've got one more question. What would be let's say this happens, has there been any investigation in the times of the year that you actually could do this work in the river?
Yeah, I understand it's related to the actual dredging itself, at least in terms of taking the sediment samples that we've had so far. We've had to wait, for lower water flows to actually pull the sediment out. In terms of, would we be able to extract sediment year round or only in summer? I'm not sure about that, but that would come through in a more detailed options analysis, because that would factor into the revenue that was available, and at what point any investment would deliver a return on top of that investment.
I'm going to go to Director Morgan. Go ahead, Director Morgan.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I can add to Mr. Fuska's comments, sediment would only be able to be removed during the fish windows with all the appropriate permissions as the existing schedule of sediment removal already takes place. The other thing in terms of next steps is the Pemberton Valley Diking District has moved forward with one small next step that the Clear Course report recommends, which was the further sediment analysis. So the PVDD through their budget has proceeded with that step. And then thirdly, I just wanted to make it quite clear that in getting this business case done through the funding that we received, the SLRD is not or staff are not suggesting that the SLRD necessarily runs, owns, leads, has necessarily any part in any commercial enterprise that results out the end of this process. We are facilitating the investigation only at this point.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? Would someone like to make the motion that we receive the report and that we refer this to the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee? Moved by Director Demare, seconded by Director Zant. Any further comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Great, thank you both for being here. And I think you're staying for 9.11, which is to, I think we're just we're adopting the plans as presented earlier by Blackwell and Associates. Is that correct, Director Morgan?
That is correct, Chair.
Go ahead. I'll move those. Okay, moved by Director Elliott, second by Director Crompton. Further comments? See none. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. We are on 10.1. We're going to do the board round table. And we will start with Dr. Elliott. I'm like, go.
I always forget this part. Councillor Stoner, you can, or Director Stoner, you can always help me out. There's always lots going on in Squamish. I think one of the things I will point out is that the National Observer revealed what is behind our smear campaign that has been creating havoc in our community, which is Canada Proud. So it's good for other communities to be alerted to the MO of this kind of stuff. We have also are looking at how to deal with a failed alternative approval process for our public works yard. So again, misinformation campaign that resulted in AAP being turned down, which is unfortunate. So we've got a report coming back from our staff on next steps, which is great. And I don't know, Councillor Stoner, any other big policy news?
I feel like I'm out of the loop because we didn't have council meeting yesterday.
No.
It's Tuesday, so it feels like it's been a long time. No, I think the only other thing, a few weeks ago, we had presentations from Woodfibre LNG and Fortis BC on an update for their projects. There's been a lot of staff turnover at Woodfibre LNG, and so there wasn't a huge amount of new information coming forward, except that they are planning on investing about 500 million over the summer on the pre-construction phase. And Fortis BC will be submitting a new amendment to their EAO certificate for staff housing with a proposed location kind of up near Quest. That would house about 600 folks at the peak. So it'll be interesting to see when that comes forward. So that'll be in the next few months.
And I just remembered something else. So things that we did during the pandemic around our temporary patio program and our parks use program. So making our parks available for people to use for classes and programs. We're bringing those into regular programming. So our new patio bylaw will be coming to council. in the coming weeks, as well as a park use bylaw. So these are the things that we learned as benefits to the community about being a little more relaxed and being a little more inviting to have that kind of activation of the public realm take place. And so I'm excited to see those changes coming forward to our council so that we can take some of the positives out of the pandemic and make those happen for the community. So looking forward to that. And there's a few new restaurants in Squamish. So, you know, you should always stop in when you're going by.
Any in particular that you would recommend?
She loves them all.
I love them all.
All equally, okay.
She just doesn't want to cook.
I don't want to cook, Director Reed, but the newer ones are the Peck and Paw, which was in Gastown and moved up, and then Cordelia's Locket, which is on our new multi-use pathway along the Mamcombe Blind Channel. If you haven't stopped in and walked there, you absolutely should. And if you haven't seen the development of the Oceanfront Park, we are creating land at the end of the peninsula for our 12-acre park. And that's underway. So very excited to see that taking shape. And I also was inside the new carbon engineering building a few weeks ago, which is great to see their new facility and their modified carbon capture plant. Oh, and the biggest news, of course, is that Capilano University is building a campus on our ocean front. Full build out, that'll have space for about 700 students. They're also looking at housing, and those will be programs that are complementary to what's happening in the Sea to Sky corridor, but it gives another educational opportunity in our backyard to support young people so they don't have to travel far from home, or for people to upskill and reskill. So very excited to see that go forward for our community.
Very cool. Thank you.
I knew there were things.
So many things. It's very good. Let's go up to Lillooet.
Oh, of course.
I'm bouncing around today.
I was going to say, I have notes. We have finally been able to promote within. So our new Public Works Manager on May 2nd will be Brandy Galeazzo, and she started with Public Works as a summer student many years ago. She's already getting flack from a few people, but I'm quite sure she will be able to handle it. So quite excited about that. We've also hired another young lady to work in the Public Works Department. So the women are ruling in Lillooet right at the moment. We had a young lady who was coming as the new manager of our rec center. And unfortunately, when it got right down to signing the contract, she could not find affordable housing. Apparently, housing in Alberta is 25 to 50% less for what they get paid to be a rec center manager. So that was kind of disappointing. So that'll go back out, I guess, to see if we can find somebody. They're starting a physio through the Friendship Center. They're starting a physiotherapy 8-week program in the pool at the rec center. And they were supposed to start this Sunday, and unfortunately, our pool developed a leak. So we're in the process of getting that repaired. Hopefully it will be up and running by Friday, but then the physiotherapy sessions won't start until April 10th. Because you need it nice and warm for us disabled people to actually get in that pool. The archaeological assessment on the new development coming on Main Street where the farmers market used to be is in process. What else? I think our planner has been up and done a site inspection for the new Riverview project. So that's moving forward. We're getting regular updates from our RCMP. Since they've combined Lytton and Lillooet, things happening on the crime, homeless, drug scenario in Lillooet is really going in a good direction of cease and desist type of thing. And Constable Hodges is really great with working with rec center and mental health and the Statland Tribal Police as well. So yeah, that's hopefully Vivian has something to add. The hub is moving along great. Tourist Information Center is going to be at the Miyazaki House if they can sort out some funding discrepancies. So, yeah, that's about it for Lillooet.
Thank you. And you're killing it in the small town BC bracket.
Oh, aren't we?
So
Aren't we? And no, I don't feel guilty.
Good job. Let's go to area A.
Okay, we missed our roundtable last time, at the last meeting. We didn't have time.
We did.
No. Anyway, so with that, on the family meeting long weekend, we had our annual Winterfest. And biggest turnout ever. We were, all the stations were kind of really segregated, so we didn't congest with people. And it turned out fantastic. We, the BRC hired a new coordinator, and she did a wonderful job. And first time we had people, vendors there at it, and it turned out really well. I volunteered, and I was the only one that had a food safe certificate, so I ended up in the kitchen like I normally do, unfortunately, but head down and go. But it turned out really well, just excellent. One of the better ones that we've had. And I think it showed that people wanted to get together again and talk. That I think, if anything, that was the biggest aspect to that Winterfest we had. Just quick update on the OCP process. Alex McKay is just doing a tremendous job. We've got our community advisory committee all confirmed, all members from each one of our 6 neighborhoods. And I'd asked that each community have their own vision and own values. And I searched the internet for community values, and I couldn't find anything I liked, and I asked Alex to see if she could find something. And lo and behold, she did. A regional district from the island in the electoral area. So we're gonna share that at our first meeting with our community advisory committee. We were supposed to have it last night, but Alex got sick. So we're gonna have it next week. So I'm really happy with where we're going with it. You know, for something that's gonna be done in-house, she's doing a tremendous job. That's all I gotta say. In the Valley in the last year, it's amazing how much funding has come into the Valley. And that was with support from the board. So we've got 2 million for Minto Communications. We got 746,000 for the Braylon Pioneer Mines office, where the museum is going to go into. And we got 150,000 for the Braylon Recreation area to build trails. And, you know, I funded a lot of studies, which Cascades has done for us. And the Hoyston, they also were engaged in some of that funding that we supported to be able to get it to the point where they could submit to NDIT for that funding. So it's really good to see where we're going. The trail committee that I chaired from the inception had stepped down from it, but they're hiring a coordinator now, which the Braylon Recreation area has. So so they're hiring somebody to move them forward too, because it seems to be the way to go in our community. So it's working out really, really well. And you know, we had our NDIT meeting the other day, and I commented on it. I thank them for supporting all of these also. The unfortunate part is that you know, our Road 40 this year has been issue after issue after issue. We've had all the road closures, and then we had the 5-day where we were isolated, and we had the communication systems out. And then after that, we had a road fatality in the canyon. where a rock fell right on top of a cab of a truck driver that was taking the equipment to the Bridge River power stations in Seton Portage. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, 2 more people died. They were backcountry skiing in our area, and they pulled over along Carpenter Reservoir and ended up in the lake. So with that, you'll see a resolution further down, talking to Road 40, and it's been an issue from the day that they put it in, and they've definitely made a lot of improvements. I've been driving that road since 1972, and but it still needs work, especially with the climate change and atmospheric rivers, and you know, we've had 2 major freeze thaws that haven't helped that area, and rock on the road, and you name it. We had that when we were isolated, it was over 160 avalanches on that road, about 100 kilometers worth. And you can imagine the work that it took to clear it. So, yeah, and I hope my resolution gets passed farther down, because it's really important for our community. And the other interesting thing, I looked really close at the boundary for SLRD Area A, and it goes to the top of Mission Mountain. So the section of the road from the dam up to where Area B starts at the crest of the ridge is in Area A. So that's why I've added that onto my director's report. We had a very good meeting with our MLA, Jackie Taggart, and her assistant, Lori Pallon. We have those meetings 3 times a year. And Barb was there, so and it was a really good meeting. We had a representative from the Shalath, the First Nations, and 2 representatives from BC Hydro. We had project manager and the site manager at that meeting. And we agreed upon a lot of the comments, a lot of the resolutions that are in my director report. So I've always found the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, they hold everything to themselves. I know that they've got some plans for that road. In fact, they're doing one right now as we speak, widening up the spot, but they won't give that information out to the public. We need to get it where they're giving the information out to the public, so we know that they're actually going to be working on things. And I've recommended it to Russell to try to get the southern MLA to do the same process as what we're doing up there, because it really, I think, makes a difference when you have your MLA at those meetings, and it's their meeting. It's not the director's meeting, it's their meeting. They chair it. So that's all, thanks.
Thank you. Let's go to Area C. Director Mack.
Yeah, thank you. Lots going on in Area C too. The Reed Road public hearing was well attended, as we've already said. I think it was very important to have that, and I thank staff for doing such a wonderful job, the chair for making it official, and there's lots of work going on. There's logging going on throughout the area, which is good. People are making money, and that's a good thing. The farmers are starting to ship their potatoes, so that's good in their realm. So the things are going pretty good. Had a wonderful drive with the new area rep for MOT. We did most of the roads. We're going to have another day where we're going to finish off going up the Duffy and down to Wedge, and that she's got a lot of deficiencies that, you know, I pointed out. I see them every day. She sees them too. So I think she's just starting to really learn her job, and hopefully she can get some traction with the people above her and get them to actually pay attention to what's needed. And our MLA too definitely does a good job of representing us in the legislature and going to bat with the ministers. You know, it's tougher when you're on the opposition side of the aisle, but anyways, spring is coming, and that's a wonderful thing, and Anderson Lake will get busy, and yeah, it's just going to be, it'll be interesting to see how many tourists we have throughout the area, and that's for all of our areas. I have a feeling it's going to be a very busy year. But having said that, I'm going to have to leave you guys now, but I'll be back in the morning. That's all right.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Mack. Okay. Thanks. Let's go to Area D, Director DeBee.
Chair, Honorable Chair, you'll have to forgive me, but I do not have a verbal report to put forward on behalf of Area D. Director Rainbow did not brief me on anything, so I'm more a listener than a speaker today, enjoying observing. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being here on his behalf, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's always nice to see you all.
Thank you. And we've lost Director Zant for a moment, so we'll go to Whistler and then we'll wrap this up.
We're just coming to the ends of our Whistler sessions process, which is designing 4 scenarios of the future that could happen. So they're not, you know, what we'd like to see happen, but what could happen. And then we'll use those scenarios to sort of understand how the decisions we are making take us down those various paths. So it'll be a tool that ultimately we use to really help inform decision-making and where we find ourselves moving. In each of the scenarios of the future, there are pieces of what's currently happening in each of them. So you read into it, but yeah, I see some of that already taking place in Whistler. And so I'm excited about that because it'll be really useful for us. This transit strike has been devastating for this whole region. It's I just find it unbelievable that we're still dealing with it. And so it's been no transit now for, I think, 7 weeks, or is it 8?
We're in week 9.
We're in week 9. And I was talking to some of our staff who said, and I don't know whether this is totally accurate or not, but it's debatable for sure. This has been tougher than COVID. It sounds crazy to say that out loud, but the fact that nobody can get anywhere in our community, most people don't have cars, has impacted our community in really devastating, disappointing ways. We've, Mayor, Director Elliott and I have been on phone calls with ministers and trying to make the case for how critical this is to find a solution. And I'll say today, I'm less hopeful than I was yesterday, which is frustrating to be less hopeful than I was yesterday. I continue to work as hard as I possibly can to get transit back on the road, but BC Transit's Provincial Crown Corporation, which is a challenging reality for us in Mount Currie, Pemberton, Whistler, and Squamish. Vail Resorts just announced that they are going to have their base pay be $20 an hour, which is going to change a lot about how people are paid in our communities, which is pretty exciting. I think that there are definitely challenges with that, but I'm someone who thinks that workers getting paid well is important, and that $20 floor, I think, is going to be helpful for our community for sure. It's nice to be back seeing people. I was just listing all of the ways that we're in person again. There's a Laugh Out Live thing that the Arts Council's putting on live comedy, and the room is filling. Living languages at the SLCC, you can go and learn about Squamish language, learn about Uklamush. That's pretty exciting. Anonymous art show is happening at Arts Whistler, which is people paint paintings and you buy them. They're local community members, not necessarily artists, and you buy a painting and then you get to find out who painted it. That's up now. Bo Dick is opening at the Udane Art Museum, and these are all places just where our community gets back in each other's space, which that Whistler Sessions was my first time being back with a large group of people. And it was such a strange experience for all of us to be experiencing this broad range of emotions all at the same time. Some people are afraid, some people are really excited, some people are anxious, some people are just overjoyed, and we're all experiencing all these emotions at once. It's a really strange time in history, I think. The provincial government required that land use contracts be replaced with zoning, and land use contracts were used for a very short time, but it was when Whistler was really building like crazy. And so now we have got this massive provincially downloaded process that we have to go through now to replace land use contracts with zoning. And so it has occupied, almost every council meeting that we have now, we've got multiple land use contracts, which require, long public engagement, full readings, public hearings, everything. And so that's consuming a huge amount of time in our community. Cheakamus Crossing, WDC built apartment buildings are for sale right now, and I think we've sold out the first building. So that's really exciting. A lot of these employee housing units are getting into the world, which we've been talking about for a long time, and to see people being able to buy them, that's really exciting. The Whistler Institute is holding an event on April 21st, where Clara Hughes, Katrina LeMay-Doan, Dick Pound are going to be in town doing a public event about the future of the Olympic movement, talk a lot about Beijing and Tokyo, and what has changed about the way Olympics happens, which will be interesting. And then finally, two sort of local government unconnected to Whistler things. Tom Barnes, who was the CEO of the MIABC, just retired after 15 years, and I've sat on their board for a long time. And I'm so impressed by that organization. I think he's done such a wonderful job, and it is so exciting that Megan Charlton, who was on our staff, is now the new CEO of the MIABC, and I think she's going to do an absolutely outstanding job. And it was really sort of a joyful moment to see her take the job, I think, for our board, but I think also local governments have had a lot to do with Megan over the years. And so I think her leadership will be very strong. And I'm always reminded, an Area D director was the founding person for the MIABC. He was the first chair, and it was his vision to pool insurance. What's his name? I'll think of it and circulate it, but really proud of the work that the MIA is doing right now, and excited about Megan's work moving us forward. So that's Whistler.
Thank you. Okay, thank you to everyone for that. Let's go to 10.2. This is a director's report from Director Mayor. Did you want to speak to it really briefly?
Yes, I'll quickly speak to it. I spoke to it a bit earlier in the roundtable, but we definitely need a prioritized plan with a short-term plan and a long-term plan. And one of the keys in one of the resolutions that have been made public, so that the public, not only in our area, but also in Area B, in the Seton Portage, Shalath area, and BC Hydro workers, the mine workers, all the projects that are gonna be happening. They were really devastated by the first fatality. And we have major concerns in that canyon. There was a rock about 8 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot. It's a canyon, and right down into the Bridge River. And a rock from the far side, from where the road is, that rock came off that cliff, bounced through the canyon, onto the road, and up against the cliff on this side. Just to give you an example, and that rock was there for probably about almost a month before it was safe enough for them to come in and jackhammer it down to little bits. And it was shortly after that, probably about 200 feet from where that accident occurred, where the fatality was. So that canyon above it was where the Hell Creek fire was in 2009. So right above the cliff is quite a steep slope with a bunch of dead trees. And there was a tree in the debris that came down when the rock hit that person. Like, we need a plan. Everybody that drives that section is, to be blunt, scared to drive that section. So, you know, for the community's sake, that's why I really want this, you know, once they create the plan, hopefully they'll approve it and move forward with creating these plans, is that it's made public so that the public knows that we're actually, Monty is going to do something with Vote 40. So I'll make the motion to approve all that's in that resolution.
Okay, just a point of order. Question for Director Clark. This type of resolution wouldn't typically be approved by this board unless we intended to action it. This is sort of creating action items for another order of government. This language could certainly be forwarded as a resolution to SILGA for endorsement by the board of SILGA, and then moved on through the process to UBCM. It appears that SILGA has closed their resolutions as of February 26th, but this could be considered an emergent issue and then considered on the floor, so it would need to be received that way. We could certainly write the letter as you suggest and ask for these things, but I don't think that we can approve this type of a resolution because these aren't our actions. So it's a bit, I think the intention is correct. I just don't think that we can. Am I right on that, Director Clark?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, it would have to be, like, if we were rewording it to that we're sending a letter requesting everything that's been requested there. But yes, I agree. We wouldn't typically see that kind of resolution, except when we're forwarding it to SILGA or
it can go straight to UBCM too. It can bypass SILGA. I know UBCM's resolution committee is quite overwhelmed by getting 171 resolutions last year. And that's always frustrating for the membership.
Is there a different way I could word it?
Yeah, we could word it so that we take the intention and send it as a letter of request for consideration by the ministry.
That's what I'd like to do then.
Can I make a wording suggestion then? It says now therefore be it resolved that the SLRD write a letter to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure with regard to the following items. And then you don't need that statement.
Yeah.
You just turn your resolution into the direction on the letter.
Yeah.
I'm good.
You're happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so moved by Director Demers.
Can I say we keep all of the CCs on there?
Yes. Does that help you?
Thank you. And as far as forwarding it as an emergency resolution?
Then we can bypass that process.
Yeah,
Bypass that part?
Yeah, because it is really locally, I mean, it's, I think, of regional interest to all of SILGA. But it may not meet their emergent criteria, so then it may have to wait until next year. And that doesn't have the urgency that you're looking for.
Yeah, what I'm waiting for is a reply from the ministry
Right,
to this.
okay,
And then if we gotta go farther, then we'll go farther.
okay. Anyone on the screen wish to speak to this? So we had it moved by Director Demir, we had it seconded by Director Weed. Final comments on this? Go ahead, Director Elliott.
I think just to help the corporate officer, in the fourth that, you can strike the first sentence. And it's the remaining, and that copies be sent. Was my intention there? Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Welcome back, Director Birch-Jones. We are on 10.3. Moving along to the Area A Tax Services Funding for 2022 budget. Director Demir, you want to speak to that?
No, I'd just like to move them all, please.
Okay, so moving these allocations of fund requests, and this has already been approved through Director LaFrance. Okay. Moved, seconded by Director Elliott. Comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director Demir. 10.4, PILT funding for the Camel's Foot Television and Radio Association from Area B. Director Birch-Jones, did you want to move that or speak to it?
I would like to move it or answer any questions, but we've talked about this before. Move that 456 be transferred from Area B PILT funds to the Lillooet Camel's Foot Television and Radio Association.
Great, moved by Director Birch-Jones, seconded by Director Weave. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Chair, yes.
I want to recuse myself from 11.1. I sit on the board of the Whistler Center for Sustainability, and I don't want there to be a perception of bias in my decision making.
All right, thank you very much. Director Crompton.
I'll move that we support the Reserve Municipalities primary application.
Okay. Write the letter. Do I have a seconder? Director Stoner? Any further comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Do you want to bring Karen back?
Karen.
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 Okay, here we go. We are now on 12.1. Letter from UBCM regarding provincial responses to our resolution that was sent in last year. Move receipt. Director Elliott, seconded by Director Weeb. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And a letter from Flynn Road regarding improvements to rural urban interface wildfire prevention response letter. Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Demir. Any comments? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Was there any late business? We will recess this open meeting. No, we can finish this. No, we have to come back.
We don't have to.
We don't have to. It is 3:41. I want to do a time check of everyone because I think
we have to go back into closed.
We have to go back into closed. We have to go back in to see this guy. We have to. What do you want to do? Do we go back into close now?
I'd be here till midnight.
Oh, you can? Okay.
That sounds
Like,
scary.
you guys have to, because
What did I miss?
Entertainment's coming, obviously.
Agenda. Like go into closed. Reopen, do hospital district. All of it.
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, we'll call for someone to move that we go into closed. Moved by Director Elliott, second by Director Demare. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. 5-minute